Sal Paolantonio, set to join us here. Of course, you see Sal all over the family of ESPN network programming, the ESPN senior national correspondent, and he joins us every Friday for a happy hour Sal Pal Friday, and he's on the Boardwalk Honda hotline as we are getting closer to the NFL draft and the draft simulator. I saw Sal on the KJZ mock draft. He had an interesting pick for the Philadelphia Eagles. It seems like the picks are all over the map here, Sal. We know this final week you start to get the BS meter running pretty high, but you've been pretty steadfast on taking a corner at that spot. And are you changing? Are you deviating from that as we get closer?
Well, I think it'll be hard to pass up Devontae Smith. That's for sure. But if Patrick Surtain is there now, Surtain was gone in that KJZ mock draft. But if he were there, I would take him for sure if I were the Eagles, because they need a corner opposite Darius Slay if they're going to play the defense I think they're going to play in the cover two. They're going to need a corner. Then the question remains, if J.C. Horn is there, Horn versus Smith at the 12th pick, I think 12 is kind of high for Horn. I don't know how you feel, Mike.
Yeah, I'm kind of indifferent. I'm kind of torn by that, too. I agree with you. I'm like, Horn, to me, I feel like, and I got the email this morning with the draft simulation, Joe Banner and Mike Tannenbaum. Mike, we had on the show last week, and he talked a little bit about pass rusher because he thinks Howie Roseman, he knows Howie really well. He's done well in the offensive line, and they've gone defensive line a lot, going pass rusher there. Joe Banner knows this organization as well as anyone. That's the philosophy of this team. So I keep feeling offensive line or defense, trading back an offensive line or defensive line. Is that something that is more and more possible? Last week we talked about moving up into the 9 area, but I keep feeling more and more moving back and going with what they know.
Yeah, if they want to move up, they're not going to move up for Devontae Smith. They might move up for Patrick Surtain, but I don't see them moving up for a wide receiver for sure. So Mike Tannenbaum, as you know, hired Howie Roseman out of Fordham Law School. So he knows Howie extremely well.
Yeah.
And, of course, Joe Banner knows the organization. And I don't have to remind you that, when Howie Roseman was scouting players for Andy Reid once he first got started, he was at Michigan in the big house, and he had his binoculars trained on Brandon Graham, and he called Andy Reid on his cell phone, and he said, I got our next pick. I got our first-round pick. His name is Brandon Graham, and, of course, Graham went on to strip sack Tom Brady in Super Bowl 52, and they got to hoist the Lombardi Trophy in South Philadelphia. So, that was in that simulated draft by Tannenbaum and Banner, which I took very seriously. I took it very seriously. They have the Eagles taking Kwity Paye. Now, am I pronouncing that correctly? I think I am.
Yep, you are.
He is. Yeah, he's the defensive end from Michigan. He has a very interesting background. Coming from Africa, and he's obviously a hungry player. He played hungry in college. He's got this 6'3", 280 frame. His 40 time was under 4.8, which is terrific for a defensive end. Not great. It's not the same as Gregory Rousseau out of Miami, who's at a 4.6 40 time. And is a little bit taller, 6'5", but 6'3" is pretty good for a guy that you could put into this Eagles defense and rush the passer. Now, is he worth the 12th pick, Mike? That's the question. Or do you trade back and try to take him some later on in the first round?
Yeah, I mean, we know this team likes to go that route. Derek Barnett, Brandon Graham is two of the picks that they've taken there. They also got Fletcher Cox way back, so they've done well in this spot. How much of I know we don't like to say need so much because you like to get the best player that you can, but is that a legitimate hole that this team has, and that 15 or 12 or wherever they get a guy, if they took one of those pass rushers, that would be applauded?
Yeah, I've said this to you before. If you draft for need, you're going to need a new job eventually. And you got to take the best player on your board. That's why you have a scouting staff. You rate players not by position, but by comparison to everybody else on your board. So if Kwity Paye is their 12th ranked player or close to it, or if Devontae Smith, same deal, or if it is J.C. Horn in that general area, to me, of those three, I'm going J.C. Horn.
J.C. Horn, the corner, of course, South Carolina. You mentioned they might move up for Patrick Surtain. They would have to do that because do we still feel strongly that Dallas, I know Dallas is putting out the smoke screens. They're talking about every offensive player. Kyle Pitts, obviously, is an interesting guy. But do we feel pretty strongly, Sal, that they would still take Patrick Surtain if he was there?
I'd be shocked if they didn't, Mike. They gave up a franchise record number of points last year. Their defense has got a new defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn. If you look at Dan Quinn's history, he's always had strong corners and strong safeties. When he was in Seattle, he lacked that in Atlanta, and it really hurt him. Surtain is a plug-in-and-play first-round blue-chip player, in my view. He's the last of the 10. You could probably take him 8 or 9, but you don't want to take him lower than 10. And I think Dallas to pass him up at 10 would be a big mistake.
ESPN Sal Paolantonio, ESPN senior national correspondent. Sal, I definitely want to get your take. We'll get back to the draft here in just a minute, but I want to get your take on Wednesday's press conference. Howie Roseman, Andy Weidel, and some would say the star of the show, he took over that show, was Nick Sirianni. Whether it was good, bad, or indifferent, we definitely got a different view of Nick Sirianni's personality on Wednesday.
And it was something that the Eagles sort of unveiled with Fran Duffy on their website, that his enthusiasm for the game, his competitiveness, his drive is apparently something that really impressed Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman and has impressed Frank Reich. Certainly, this guy wants to teach the game. But here's my view of it. I'm not sure that the public needs to see all of that because in this day and age with social media, Mike, it can become a polarizing thing. I think, your methods as a coach don't necessarily need to be unveiled to everybody everywhere because that's the sort of thing that you'd certainly want to keep to the relationships you have with your players, right? Sometimes those things get quirky. Sometimes people don't really understand what it is to be coached up at that level or to be coached up at all. Not many people are at competitive athletics at that level. So I'm not sure you need to really reveal all that, honestly, to tell you the truth. And of course, the reaction on social media was, I don't know,
all over the place.
Negative. It was overwhelmingly negative, I thought.
Yeah, it was all over the place for sure. There's no question about it. People were it was interesting because, Roseman's up there and Andy Weidel, I think they're mandated to be there. They don't want to do that, right? If they didn't have to, they wouldn't have been there.
I'm not so sure about that. I think all of these teams want to put their best foot forward. The National Football League's pretty good about making sure you pump up the draft, and one of the ways you do that with all 32 cities is getting everybody out there, and they like setting the agenda. So I'm not so sure about that, Mike. I think Roseman likes the limelight for sure.
All right, well, he was asked by your colleague Tim McManus regarding last year and that they deviated from the draft board a little bit, and he didn't poo-poo it. He essentially, though, said, we don't want to write the book on that draft class, but we're excited about getting those players with our new coaching staff. Is he saying that he didn't think the last staff did a good enough job with the players they drafted?
That was certainly the way I interpreted it. There's no question about that.
Right.
Yeah. Jalen Rieger basically did not reach his potential because of the offensive coaching staff. That's bottom line. That's the way I interpreted it.
Yes, and they've also been getting criticized a lot for the receiver they took the year before. You wonder if they're insinuating, hey, we've got a receiver head coach. We think we can get more out of these weapons than we were getting before. Who knows? I thought there was a lot of interesting things to take from the press conference, including, one of the things that they talked about, and I thought this got talked about a lot, but they really insinuated about the offensive line. Andy Weidel was asked about guards. They even said that Isaac Seumalo could play center and guard, which would not preclude them then from having to take one or the other. That was almost a hint to me that offensive line is heavily in play for them.
Yeah, they don't want, I don't think they want to. The feeling that I get in talking to people on background in NovaCare is that, one, they feel like they can compete in the division this year, that they're not that far away. And, truth be told, won 4 games. The Washington football team won 7 and won the division. So there's a difference of 3 games. And I buy into that. I believe that.
I
think
agree.
The division is, I think you and I agree on that. I think the division is weak enough where you could steal a game or 2 if you just do the right thing. 1, don't turn the ball over at the quarterback position. If you stop that, beautiful. Okay, 2, reduce the sacks by, let's say, from 65 to 40. Mike, that's not a lot to ask. If you can get it down to 40 or 45, now you're in games. If you're not turning the ball over at the quarterback position, I'm looking at a statistics here that just blows me away. Carson Wentz, franchise quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles, won 11 games in his second year in the season, was off target throwing the football 24%. That was the most of any starting quarterback in the National Football League last year. Worse than Dwayne Haskins.
Jeez.
Worse than Drew Lock. Worse than Mitchell Trubisky. Worse than Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was at 17%. Worse than Daniel Jones and Tua Tagovailoa. So, all you've got to do is get it to the point where Carson Wentz is in the Daniel Jones category and is not turning the ball over, and they're sacking the quarterback only 40 times instead of 65. Mike, they may win 2 or 3 games. Don't you think?
I've been accused of kind of being on this island by myself, but I agree. If you just got mediocre quarterback play last year, you're probably 500. And the injuries that they have now, if that occurs again, you might have another bad season. But look at San Francisco. They were in the Super Bowl the year before. Were they a 6-win team, or did the injuries help them get to 6 wins? I feel like
right. So that's part one of the way the Eagles feel. Sorry to interrupt you. Yes, that's part one of the way the Eagles feel inside NovaCare, having talked to people. They feel like they can compete if they just do a few things better than they did last year. The other thing that we mentioned last week on your show was if they just stop the big play cover 2, play 2 deep safeties instead of single high, and don't give up the big play. At least reduce it by 30%, which is not a lot to ask. Now you're in 3 or 4 games in a weak schedule.
Very weak schedule.
And a 17-game season. Maybe you get to 7 or 8 wins. Now you're in the ballgame. And then the second thing is, though, they want to compete this year, but they don't want to take, quote, shortcuts, unquote, in terms of rebuilding long term. Now, let me translate that for you. This is exactly what I was told. So I'm using it in quotes because it was what I was told on several occasions. That means exactly what you were just saying, Mike. They don't want to take shortcuts, meaning build from the inside out, stay to the core values that they had when they drafted Fletcher Cox, they drafted Lane Johnson, they drafted Brandon Graham, they drafted Jason Kelsey, who are the cornerstones of the trenches of the football team.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's the one spot, Sal, that you can look back and say they have done a good job regardless of round. I mean, they got Mailata in the 7th. They got Seumalo in the 3rd. They found, guys, Kelsey in the 6th. That's one spot that they have done a pretty good job in. Sweat in the 4th. The one guy that I guess the jury's out on is Barnett. I don't know how they feel about him, but he's kind of been incomplete maybe. Is that fair?
Well, yeah, sure, but of course there's the Danny Watkins thing. But I mean, they've had
yes.
some misses, but a lot of that has to do with Jeff Stoutland, for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, the way he's developed. I mean, and I'm not I don't think Mailata is a starter in the National Football League. He hasn't proven that to me yet, and they did miss on Andre Dillard, as we know. So, but getting back to your point, Mike, which is a good one, is that at 12, they can go in a lot of different directions, depending on the position that they're targeting or the player that they're targeting. But the bottom line is, if you draft for need and ignore your board, in the end, like they did with Dillard, and I think they drafted for need with Dillard, then you really hurt yourself long term.
A Sal Pal Friday right here, ESPN senior national correspondent. The show was excellent the other night. Really enjoyed that. The draft stuff is a lot of fun. Down the stretch they come. You had the mock draft pick, KJZ, Devonta Smith. If he's there, we'll see. If a corner is there, do they trade back? That's what makes it so interesting, and we'll do it again. Of course, the draft on Friday, we will know the next time we chat, Sal, who the Eagles have selected, and that will be a very interesting piece to see where the next step of Eagles football. This is an important one. They have, 4 picks in the top 85 this year and 4 picks in the first 2 rounds as of now for next year. So this thing might flip around pretty quick for this Eagles organization, but it all starts on Thursday night, the NFL Draft, ESPN's coverage, and, of course, a Sal Pal Friday here on the Sports Bash. Johnny G, the Burger Real Estate team, they're great, and they presented Sal Pal here on the Friday. Thank you, man.
Oh, thank you. And don't forget our primetime draft special for the NFL Matchup Show is Tuesday night, April 27th, 10 p.m., prime time, ESPN 2. We got tremendous reaction from the first show on Wednesday night, and the second, part 2, is Tuesday night with my colleagues Greg Cosell and Matt Bowen. And thanks to Johnny G and the Griner team at Burger Realty in Ocean City for supporting my appearance on this wonderful program on Friday afternoons. Thank you, Michael.
All right, Sal, take care. There's Sal Paolantonio, a Sal Pal Friday in the books, and he, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.